Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this December 18th, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show if you so choose from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Time, Monday through Friday on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Today, someone had sent me an email and said, why don't you replay that interview you did years ago with Svali? And she's an ex-Illuminati member that I interviewed years ago. Had to do with satanic worshiping in the Vatican and her life story. Now, every time I do a story like this, even back then or even now, I always wonder who these people are and whether they're COINTEL agents or not, put there to tell us things so that we can just, worry about things that we really are out of our control and instill this fear in us. And so I always wonder who they are, but in a sense don't really care because the stuff does go on. Now, the reason I know that is when I was in Rome, and this was years ago during the 80s, I was confronted by a woman who told me some of the same things that Svali did. Now, she was a for real person. And it was in the days when I wasn't even working on these stories. So I had an idea that at first I thought she was a bit crazy. And then when I found out through a personal friend that she wasn't, when Svali came, I said, let's look for some people that have had the same experiences. So I want to do that, and I'm going to get to that. I've got it all ready for you. But I did want to mention a couple things on this, what I call Open Mind Friday. It's not open line or open calls. And in fact, I got so tired of taking phone calls. And I decided if I ever do it again, I'm going to start rating the callers. And because most of them are terrible. And you'll be talking about a subject and they'll come up with something completely off the wall. And, I love callers, but I want them to be good. And I want them to be thoughtful, and I want them to be open-minded, and I want them to think about what they're saying, not just to criticize. And even the criticisms sometimes can be really terrible. If you're going to criticize somebody, think about what you're saying, and I don't mind that. So if I ever start taking callers again, I'm going to start rating them, and then I'm going to have a contest and have the best call of the year, the best call of my show, and I can think back on maybe all the years I took callers, there were about maybe 10 really good ones. And then when you deal in this subject, you never know who's calling you. Could be the Jesuit priest sitting over there who's been assigned to screw around with me. So that stuff does happen. But today, before I get to Svali, let me tell you, I was thinking about these signs and symbols that tell us what kind of world we live in. And I've done shows on this before, but it just came to my mind today, and I thought it'd be interesting. Just check out what statues on the top of your Capitol building. Many people have written about it, and some people just gloss over it and say, oh, it's a freedom statue. Well, let me tell you exactly what it is, and a little bit about how it came about. Now, this time in history was interesting. It was there, during that time around in 1849, in that period, right around the time of the Civil War and all that stuff coming up. Interesting enough, Rome was very interested in America, and they had this maniac pope, and I say that without any hesitation, because if you read the book written by Bernard Hassler, it's called How the Pope Became Infallible. Most people don't realize that was a doctrine that this Pope, they called him Pio Nono, Pope Pius IX, came up with. And when you read Hassler's book, you'll realize how crazy this doctrine really is. Now, I grew up as a Catholic and thought the Pope was always infallible. From the time of God said, you are infallible. That's the way they present it. But when you see what Hassler did, and he was a high-level priest. He, I believe, was killed because of this book, although they say he died suddenly in his 40s, good health. And it just happened to be after he sent a letter to Pope John Paul II. His book sent shockwaves really through the Vatican, because it was the first account of really how this doctrine came about and how it was kind of the Jesuit henchmen that finally pushed it across the table. Most cardinals, even back then, didn't want it. But the point is, when you see all this stuff that they do, it's really crazy that we don't really understand that they are the controlling hand behind the formation of this country to begin with. So instead of getting into, and I'll do this in another show because there's a point in history before the Revolutionary War that needs to be really dissected to show the Vatican influence on our founding fathers, etc., and how they were sold out even then. But the point I want to make about this statue is that it came at a time when there was a lot of this craziness going on in Rome, a lot of craziness going on here in America. The Civil War was coming around, and all of this stuff was happening. And it's crazy to think that Rome was not involved. So, what is this Statue of Freedom on your Capitol building? Why would it be there? Most people just say, "Oh, it's a Statue of Freedom," but when you really look at it, it has the great significance who really is the controlling hand behind this country. Now, looking at this statue, here's exactly what it is. Persephone. It's the goddess of the U.S. Capitol dome. Said by her priests to have been immaculately conceived, she was renamed Freedom for American consumption. Abducted by Hades, son of Saturn, she ruled the dead and all else that is within the earth, namely metals and precious stones. At daybreak of May 9th, 1993, helicopters lowered the Queen of the Dead to the ground level for her first cleaning in more than a century. The author in this case was Tupper Saucy. He wrote this. It's very interesting. He said he attended this ceremony and snapped the photograph. But many don't realize how this even came about. And so, instead of going in depth on it, I've done it before, why don't you just look up Persephone? Why don't you look up how the statue got there? And why don't you look up about why Abraham Lincoln refused to even go to the ceremony when it was finally hoisted up? It was in fact built. Was constructed in Rome and brought here to be bronzed by, and the Congress paid a lot of money at that time, $3,000 to get this thing done. And at the same time, we have this craziness going on in Rome where they're now creating this. When you read, and I want you to go to Bernard Hassler's book. I'm not going to lay it out for you. I've done many shows on it. But go to his book, How the Pope Became Infallible, and you'll see how crazy it really is, how crazy of a doctrine it is. And then go and read about freedom. You know, what really freedom is here and who is behind it and why they put that there. And it's just amazing, you know, when you walk into the Capitol building and you go to the House of Representatives, when did these fasci get put up behind the speaker's podium? I mean, that's a symbol of Roman fascism, and it's right there for you to look at. Why would that be? Well, those are questions you need to go and answer for yourselves. Go back to some of my old shows, and I'm just not in the mood right now to get in depth on these subjects because I've talked about them before. And somebody wanted me to play this Svali interview that I did. And let me just tell you this. It doesn't matter, really, if she was set up to do this. You know this goes on. Or if she was for real. And there are for real people out there that go through this. And I told you I met one even before I even started any of this research when I lived in Rome. And you know, when you're there, you can see a lot more because you're right there in the belly of the beast. Well, anyway, let me play this interview that I did, God knows, must be almost 10 years ago, with Svali, the ex-alumna. Wow, Greg, can you speak today? That's why I'm playing this, you know. Anyway, let's see what she has to say.
Website all week. I've been running this series on the feared Illuminati. That word is used, and it started to be used back in the 18th century, I believe. And there's other words. There's other words, the family, the order for people that are inside this group. So let's not get hung up on just the words. But what this group does is amazing. And as I documented in my series, which is going on now, part 3 is on today. So if you want to go to Arctic Beacon, get that. and it's talking about Svali, who was a member of the Illuminati, the family, the order. She's with us as our guest today, and after this break, we're going to find out the whole story from beginning to end about Svali's involvement, and then about how she decided to get out and what she's doing now. And I might add, it's a great thing what she's doing now, alerting people and also helping many, many people in America understand exactly what this group is all about. So anyway, we'll be back with Svali on the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Szymanski.
Okay, so I caught it right. The guy that put this on the YouTube didn't take out the breaks, so I caught it right at the break. That's a good intro anyway. Gives you a little bit of reason to listen. And let me go back to that interview as we come back from that break.
It's 8 minutes after the hour, and we're going to get deep inside the Illuminati, the family, the order. We have a guest that was involved with this group, born into it for over 30 years, and her name is Svali. Svali, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Well, it's nice to have you here, and I know you don't give radio interviews, and I really want to thank you because I think it really does help the American people understand about this secret organization that you were born into. So I guess before we, I guess we can just start from the beginning and tell us right from the beginning, you were born into this from wealthy parents, and tell us about your training in this group and when you were a young child and then up into your orientation at the Vatican. Go ahead.
That's a pretty broad area, Greg. I mean, that could take hours, if you know what I mean.
Yes, but if you could just outline it for us.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in a group. I was born in Germany, came to the U.S. very young, and basically went through all the training that the group, all members of the group do undergo training to different degrees, depending on the role. By the time I was a teenager, I was a youth leader, and by the time I was 22, I became the youngest member of Leadership Council in San Diego County. And at that time, I was a head trainer. I was the sixth trainer. I eventually moved up to the second position. Mm-hmm. And when I was 12, I had mentioned with you the ceremony at the Vatican. That they really do make all leadership in the group undergo at some point.
Now, basically, when you were growing up, I remember you told me that you were instilled at a young age. You were born to a very wealthy, well-to-do family. You moved back to the States. You were told at a very young age you were special. You were chosen. Correct?
Well, they tell everyone in the group that they're special and chosen. And in fact, that's one of the things that made me very cynical when I was older, is that, you will never meet a person who's an Illuminati who's not been told and programmed for years that they're special, they're the only one that can do things for quote-unquote family. But I was told, yes, I would do great things for family one day. And the reason why, I guess, I can filter some of this with an objective view is I know what my role in the group was, and it was over quite a significant number of other people. So I don't evaluate my role or specialness within the group, not so much by what I was told, but by what I did.
So you reach the age of 12, and then you're told by your parents you're going to an induction ceremony in the Vatican. Can you tell us how that happened and what occurred at that ceremony when you went there?
Okay, this isn't easy to talk about, as you know. When I was 12, I was flown over to Germany, and I was I'll call him the German father's house over there, and there was some preparation for a few days beforehand, and I was told that there would be a very important ceremony, and it was considered a sealing ceremony at that point. And basically, I was told a little bit about what I was expected to do during the ceremony. When we got there, we went to the Vatican. There's underneath the Vatican, there's a large room that I described to you when we talked before. It has 13 catacomb chambers leading into it and what they do is they, as you go down these steps into the room, you can see that it's almost circular, and so they're all around it, and
Do you know how many other children were with you being inducted into the family or the order, as they call it?
There were 2 other children at that point, but there were several adults too.
Okay.
See, the church also brings in adults to swear their allegiance too. Just so you know, I was told, and I don't know if this is true, if you rise to a certain position within the Catholic Church hierarchy, you do have to go through that ceremony as well.
Okay, so you're down in this room with your parents weren't present.
No. The German father and the father were. Yeah.
Okay, and at that point, tell our listeners what you witnessed.
Well, there was a table. It looked like dark glass in the center of the room. I mean, it was made out of stone, but it was very shiny and dark and black. And it may have been something like obsidian or onyx. I'm not sure. I'd have to. That's the only time I've seen stone like that. And it had like around the corners, it had like these gold, I guess, channels that to collect fluids. And little boy was placed in the center of the table and drugged. I think he was drugged because he was very quiet. He didn't move or say anything during the ceremony.
This was a little 3 or 4-year-old boy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they continued to do a child sacrifice.
Yes,
right in front of you.
They did. Yes. Yeah, I told you about that before. Yeah.
Now, afterwards, what a unbelievable experience for a youth. I mean, for a 12-year-old. I mean, I just thought, what went through your mind? I guess when that happened. I mean,
I was terrified. I mean, I was absolutely horrified. I can't describe the terror you feel when you go through something like that.
And do you remember the words they were saying as this was going on?
The man was in scarlet. He was speaking in Latin, and basically he was saying, please accept the sacrifice, on this day. But then, and then he said the sacrifice will seal the ceremony, and then he did it. Again, I was so terrified that if you've ever been in a situation where your heart's racing, but you can't do anything, so you're just kind of sitting there and you're kind of like fading in and out.
I can remember as a youth being frightened, but I don't think I've ever gone through anything quite like this.
Yeah, imagine your heart rate going up to about 220. You can't move, so you're kind of shaking, but trying like not to show it. Mm-hmm. And it was horrible. And I was keep thinking inside, I can't wait. I can't wait. I mean, you don't say this. Inside, you're just kind of saying over and over, I can't wait till it's over. I can't wait till it's over. I can't wait till it's over. Afterwards, the man in scarlet, he had a huge golden ring on his hand, and he came over to the center of the room, and he had each of the people that were swearing that day, I had to go forward and kneel before him and kiss his ring and swear my allegiance to the new order, to the new world order, until my death.
Now, at that point, you are escorted out.
Yes, yeah. And after the ceremony was all over, I mean, the other people also did theirs as well. They had to swear their allegiance too. And
they were the same age as? They were the same age as you?
The 2 children were, but there were also 3 adults that went forward and did the same. And afterwards, we were told, may the same to you or worse occur should you ever break this oath.
So it's basically, imagine at that age, and you weren't really prepped for this, were you? I mean, you were told there was a ceremony, but nothing, you didn't expect anything like this, from what I gathered talking to you.
It was very difficult to go through, just because the sense of horrific oppression down there, too, was the worst. I mean, I've gone through some ceremonies in my life, in the Illuminati, you do go through them. I have to say that, in my experience, this was the worst, just because I can't explain the amount of darkness in a room like that, just the pure evil. And unless you've ever been in a seeing oppression, I mean, it's just horrible. It wasn't just what happened, but just, I mean, the evil present, oppression, or when God's love is present and joy and peace, which is the exact opposite of what was in that room.
Now, you know what I find quite interesting about this? About 25 years ago, I was a reporter and a freelance writer in Rome, and I spent 6 years there. I walked through the Vatican many, many times, hundreds of times, covered the papal addresses, things like that. And during that time, I was there during a Vatican scandal, which involved the church bank and other things, members of the Illuminati, the Freemasons. I was approached by a woman on Via Veneto. I'll never forget this. Rome's a small town, and people knew I was covering stories about the secret societies, things like that, because I had to ask people. Well, this woman came up to me and told me similar stories. She wasn't quite as specific because she couldn't handle it. She would break out crying, and had tried to commit suicide twice because she couldn't get out of the Illuminati. She was a member, she was, again, born into it, a very wealthy northern Italian family. And she told me basically the same ceremony took place with her. And so when I started talking to you, I wanted to relay that to you and to also relay to my listeners that I heard about this 25 years ago from a woman by the name of Maria and many other people, several other people in Italy that I talked to. I was never able to locate, or really, probably for my own safety, never find out what happened. But again, Svali's corroborating a story that I heard about 25 years ago. We'll get back after this break. This incredible story about a member of the Illuminati who's now out of the group, safe on the Republic Broadcasting Network.
Okay, I'm going to get back to that Svali interview in the second half hour. Just wanted to say that it brought back memories when that woman approached me in Rome. And it was at a time when I was really a novice at this subject and really wasn't sure of anything. I just heard stories, didn't know who was telling the truth. This girl opened up her story to me, and it was an incredible one that I, at the time, to be honest with you, I had a hard time believing. But as the years went on and the more research I did, the more I could understand that she most likely, with all probability, was telling the truth. As far as Svali goes, she disappeared after a while. Then she reappeared on a number of other stations after that. And we talked, I think I talked in depth with her, did many written stories about it, several radio shows. And I think it's worth going back and listening to. And I wanted to thank the person who sent me the email that wanted to hear this, to refresh my memory on this story, which is really an important one. If you realize how evil this group really is and who they're really worshiping. And that's why when I started the show, I said, what's on that Capitol building? That's exactly the same organization. Shouldn't be there, but it is. And anyway, let's get back to Svali in the second half hour. And I'm debating I've got a couple really short clips on certain topics related to this. I might play those as well. We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this Friday, December 18th, 2015 day on our calendar. And I played for you a clip. It was a YouTube put together on an interview I did with Svali when she talked about child sacrifice in the Vatican. And you got the gist of what she was saying. You can go to YouTube. You can just put in Svali interview with Greg Szymanski. And you can see, you can listen to the whole thing, or maybe I'll play it another time. But I wanted to play a couple other things on the same subject that I've encountered. Now, this is a 3-minute clip, and I find it quite interesting. Now, most of you, when you're going to hear all these Latin words, I'm going to have to turn the volume down, and I'm going to give you the English translation. But on April 27th, 2014, it is clear that Pope Francis declares Lucifer as God. And they say it in Latin. Now, I grew up listening to Latin all my life when I was a kid, going to Mass every other day, etc., etc. But this is quite interesting. So I want to play this 3-minute clip, and perhaps you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about. So this is April 24th, 2015. It's only 3 minutes. See if I can get the volume right. There was a ceremony held. The Pope broadcasted this event in 3D, HD, and 4K. This entire world had the ability to listen to this, but why go through all that trouble? Why did the Pope want the world to see this? His flame dawning his own creation. May I say, O Lucifer, who knows no setting, Christ your Son, who came back from the dead and shed his peaceful light to the human race, and is alive and reigns forever and ever. And then they all say, Amen. Now, did you really catch that? Did you hear exactly what he was saying? Lucifer, there in Latin, was declared God. Who is Lucifer anyway, and why should we care? The Bible tells us exactly who Lucifer is. Lucifer is none other than Satan himself. Lucifer is Latinized version of his biblical name, Halo. This is why the beginning of the declaration started with his flame light dawning his own creation. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Lucifer is a fallen angel created by God. His name became Satan, which means adversary. Don't be deceived. Please look into this yourself, please. Please do it. And many of us who come from Catholicism, and some still belong, this information is presented. And, really, as this video says, the next step is yours. You have a pope who just told you that they worship Lucifer.
I believe in the Pope because he believes in peace. And my definition of peace is accepting all religion.
Accepting all religion.
So it was really amazing because now I'm 31 years old and I never thought about becoming Catholic. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen, of course, but already the thought of it.
This is a pope that struck such a huge chord among so many people in such a short time. But many do now expect him to get down to business and start tackling the very sensitive issues of reform and cleanup of the church. They hope that his humility and simplicity.
Well, there you go. There you see it right there. Paying homage to a man who just told you that they worship Lucifer. What could be clearer? Well, I also found this, and I thought it'd be interesting to play. And this is an interview that Bob Dylan did, and this was with 60 Minutes. And the question you have to ask is, who is Bob Dylan talking about? Making a deal with God or the devil? Listen to what he says, and we're going to play, maybe 13 to 14 minutes of this, just because I think it's quite interesting where he came from and some of the things he says throughout this interview.
I read somewhere that you wrote Blowing in the Wind in 10 minutes. Is that right? Probably. Just like that? Yeah. Where did it come from? It came from, right out of that wellspring of creativity, I would think, That wellspring of creativity has sustained Bob Dylan for more than 4 decades. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, and produced 500 songs. You got it lighter. And more than 40 albums. You ever look at music that you've written and look back at it and say, whoa, that surprised me? I used to. I don't do that anymore. I don't know how I got to write those songs. What do you mean you don't know how? Well, those early songs were like almost magically written. Darkness at the break of noon, shadows even the silver spoon, handmade blade, a child's balloon. Eclipses both the sun and moon, to understand you knew too soon, there's no sense in trying. This Dylan classic, It's Alright Mom, was written in 1964. Piece the hollow horn, plays wasted words, proves to warn that he not busy being born, is busy dying. Well, try to sit down and write something like that. There's a magic to that, and it's not Siegfried and Roy kind of magic, it's a different kind of a penetrating magic. And I did it. I did it at one time. You don't think you can do it today? Does that disappoint you? Well, you can't do something forever, and I did it once, and I can do other things now, but I can't do that. Dylan has been writing music since he was a teenager in the remote town of Hibbing, Minnesota, the eldest of 2 sons of Abraham and Beatty Zimmerman. Did you have a good life, a good, happy childhood growing up? I really didn't consider myself happy or unhappy. I always knew that there was something out there that I needed to get to, and it wasn't where I was at that particular moment. It wasn't in Minnesota? No. It was in New York City. As he writes in his book, he came alive when when at age 19, he moved to Greenwich Village, which at the time was the frenetic center of the 60s counterculture. Within months, he had signed a recording contract with Columbia Records. You referred to New York as the capital of the world, but when you told your father that, he thought that it was a joke. Did your parents approve of you being a singer-songwriter, going to New York?
No, they wouldn't have wanted that for me, but my parents never went anywhere. My father probably thought the capital of the world was wherever he was at the time. He couldn't possibly be where any place else where he and his wife were in their own home. That to them was the capital of the world.
What made you different? What pushed you out of there?
Well, I listened to the radio a lot. I hung out in the record stores and I slam-banged around on the guitar and played the piano and learned songs from a world which didn't exist around me.
He says even then he knew he was destined to become a music legend. I was heading for the fantastic lights, he writes. Destiny was looking right at me and nobody else. Use the word destiny over and over throughout the book. What does that mean to you?
It's a feeling you have that you know something about yourself nobody else does. The picture you have in your mind of what you're about will come true. That's kind of a thing you kind of have to keep to your own self because it's a fragile feeling and you put it out there and somebody will kill it. So it's best to keep that all inside.
When we asked him why he changed his name, he said that was destiny too. So you didn't see yourself as Robert Zimmerman?
And for some reason, I never did.
Even before you started performing?
No, even then. Some people get born, to the wrong names, wrong parents. I mean, that happens.
Tell me how you decided on Bob Dylan.
You call yourself what you want to call yourself. This is the land of the free.
Bob Dylan created a world inspired by old folk music, with piercing and poetic lyrics, as in songs like A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall.
So gunshot swords in the hands of young children.
Songs that reflected the tension and unrest of the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 60s.
And it's hard rain, they're gonna fall.
It was an explosive mixture that turned Dylan by age 25 into a cultural and political icon, playing to sold-out concert halls around the world and followed by people wherever he went. He was called the voice of his generation and was actually referred to as a prophet of Messiah.
Go, driver, go.
Yet he saw himself simply as a musician.
You feel like an imposter when someone thinks you're something and you're not.
What was the image that people had of you, and what was the reality?
The image of me was certainly not a songwriter or a singer. It was more like some kind of a threat to society in some kind of way.
What was the toughest part for you personally?
It was like being in an Edgar Allan Poe story. You're just not that person everybody thinks you are, although they call you that all the time. You're the prophet, you're the savior. I never wanted to be a prophet or savior. Elvis, maybe. I could easily see myself becoming him. But prophet, no.
I know that, and I accept, you don't see yourself as the voice of that generation. But some of your songs did stop people cold. And they saw them as anthems, and they saw them as protest songs. It was important in their lives. It sparked a movement.
If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times, they are changing.
I mean, you may not have seen it that way, but that's the way it was for them. How do you reconcile those two things?
My stuff were songs, they weren't sermons. If you examine the songs, I don't believe you're going to find anything in there that says that I'm a spokesman for anybody or anything, really.
But they saw it.
Yeah, but no, they must not have heard the songs.
It's ironic, that the way that people viewed you was just the polar opposite of the way you viewed yourself.
Isn't that something?
Dylan did almost anything to shatter the lofty image many people had of him. He writes that he intentionally made bad records, once poured whiskey over his head in public, and as a stunt, he went to Israel and made a point of having his picture taken at the Wailing Wall wearing a skull cap. When you went to Israel, you wrote that the newspapers changed me overnight into a Zionist, and this helped a little. How did it help?
Look, if the common perception of me out there in the public was that I was either a drunk or I was a sicko or a Zionist or a Buddhist or a Catholic or a Mormon, all of this was better than Archbishop Anarchy.
The spokesman for the generation.
Yeah.
Opposed everything.
Mm-hmm.
He was especially opposed to the media, which he says was always trying to pin him down.
Do you think of yourself primarily as a singer or as a poet?
I think of myself more as a song and dance man.
Let me talk a little bit about your relationship with the media. You wrote the press. I figured you lied to it. Why?
I realized at the time that the press, the media, they're not the judge. God's the judge. The only person you have to think about lying twice to is either yourself or to God. The press isn't either of them. And I just figured it irrelevant.
Bob Dylan tried to run away from all of that. In the mid-'60s, he retreated with his wife and 3 young children to Woodstock, New York. But even there, he couldn't escape the legions of fans who descended on his home begging for an audience with the legend himself. So people would actually come to the house?
Mm-hmm.
And do what?
Want to discuss things with me, politics, philosophy, and organic farming and things, you know.
What did you know about organic farming?
Nothing. Not a thing.
What did you mean when you wrote that the funny thing about fame is that nobody believes it's you?
People will, they'll say, are you, I think you are, and say, I don't know, you know, and then they'll say, you're him, and you say, okay, you know, yes. And then the next thing, I'm saying, well, no, you know, like, are you really him? You're not him. And you know, that can go on and on.
You go out to restaurants now?
I don't like to eat in restaurants.
Because people come up and say, are you him?
That's always going to happen, yeah.
Do you ever get used to it?
No.
At his peak, fame was taking its toll on Bob Dylan. He was heading towards a divorce from his wife, Sarah. In concerts, he wore white makeup to mask himself, but his songs revealed the pain.
But all the while, he was alone, the past was close behind. He's seen a lot of women, but she never escaped his mind, and he just grew, tangled up in blue.
You said, my wife, when she married me, had no idea of what she was getting into.
Well, she was with me back then, too thick and thin, you know. It just wasn't the kind of life that she had ever envisioned for herself, any more than the kind of life that I was living that I had envisioned for mine.
By the mid-1980s, he felt he was burned out and over the hill. You also wrote that I'm a 60s troubadour, a folk rock relic, a wordsmith from bygone days. I'm in the bottomless pit of cultural oblivion. Those are pretty harsh words.
Well, I'd seen all these titles written about me. You know?
And you started to believe it?
Well, I believed it anyway. You know, I wasn't getting any thrill out of performing. I thought it might be time to close it up, you know?
You really thought about quitting, folding up to 10?
I had thought I'd just put it away for a while. But then I started thinking, that's enough, you know?
But within a few years, Dylan told us he recaptured his creative spark, and he went back on the road. Performing more than 100 concerts a year.
And the album of the year is...
In 1998, he won 3 Grammy Awards.
Time Out of Life.
At age 63, Bob Dylan remains a voice as unique and powerful as any there has ever been in American music. His fellow musicians paid tribute to him when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, joining him in a rousing rendition of his most famous song. As you probably know, Rolling Stone magazine just named your song, Like a Rolling Stone, the #1 song of all time. 12 of your songs are in their list of the top 500. That must be good to have as part of your legacy.
Oh, maybe this week, but the lists, they change names, quite frequently. Really, I don't really pay much attention to that.
But it's a pat on the back, huh?
This week it is. But, who's to say how long that's going to last?
Well, it's lasted a long time for you. I mean, you're still out here doing these songs. You're still on tour.
I do, but I don't take it for granted.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my hand.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And this earth, and then in the world we can't see.
Bob Dylan has been nominated this year for the Nobel Prize in Literature for his songwriting. His new book has been a bestseller for the past 7 weeks. It was published by Simon & Schuster, which is owned by Viacom, the parent company of CBS. Dylan is planning to write 2 more volumes of his memoirs.
Okay, just a little tidbit on Dylan, and probably the most telling statement was right at the end. And I purposely played the whole interview because all you hear on YouTube is they play the last 40 seconds, and the question is asked, was he making a deal with God or the devil? It's up to you to figure out. And some of the things were interesting throughout his songs written magically. Now, he said, is this from the wellspring of creativity? So you make up your own mind what Dylan was really talking about. And taking a little blast in the past isn't bad either, especially on a Friday, getting ready for the weekend, the holidays. And I wanted to play that just to give you an idea of... I think the most important part was when he was saying he did mention that he had a relationship with God. Now, who that God is, we don't know. We know when the video I just played, or that little clip I played before, that the Vatican likes to say they worship God as well, but we heard exactly who they worship. So use your own judgment with Dylan. Of course, I played that Svali tape, which tells you a little bit about the truth about the satanic worshiping in the Vatican. And over the years, I'd talked to several people who witnessed it, starting in the 1980s when I spoke to that woman in Rome who confronted me with a story. So I wanted to at least get to that today. And in a sense, we started out by talking about that statue on the Capitol building. And I think it's really wise for you to start thinking about all these signs and symbols that you see in your courthouses, that you see in your public buildings. And much of Catholicism, to me, is steeped in paganism, and I've learned that throughout the years, growing up in it, believing otherwise. And as we look at the state of our country today, ask yourself this question: do we really have a freedom of religion anymore? Or has it all been scripted for us? It's a good question. And I think you'd have to ask yourself, how much do I have to research to get to this truth? That's up to you as well. And hopefully on this show I try to bring stories, try to bring information that gives you a little bit of a nudge to look in certain directions and make up your own mind about it. We're going to be back next week. I'm taking a couple days off for the holidays, but we'll see you next week on the other side of the weekend. Have a good weekend. Enjoy yourself. I'm sure the holidays will keep you busy during this period of time. And we'll come back Monday with another show on the Investigative Journal, and perhaps continue, maybe play a little bit of the Svali interview that I started playing today. And we'll see what happens. So come back Monday on the Investigative Journal. And like I said, have a good weekend, and see you on Monday. Good night.